at was what organizations have you relied on? What do you think ties the community together on this kind of issue, so that we can put political pressure and really get together?
Yeah. I would say if partisan politics divides communities really quick, and we were very intentional to not start with certain communities that have a tendency to divide. The coalition we now have, Friends of Family Farmers, that is the largest coalition of family-scale farmers in Oregon, farmers ranchers, is a main group of ours, and they span the whole political spectrum. It's straight working with libertarian farmers and socialist farmers, and they're all coming together saying this is what's important. It's like being in control of our local food system. We're all in this together. That's those types of groups. The small businesses are obvious, and they're often neglected or left out. I know that there's a BALI chapter, Business Alliance for Local Living Economy here. Starting there and saying you already have the value system for local economy. How can we work together? And sometimes business folks might politically be different than others. That I would hope so. We want diversity. So reaching out and saying we want the same thing. So not starting from I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican and I think we need I think it divides. Obviously trade unions have a vested interest in the health of the local economy. Unions, just that word tends to divide this country. Keep it in mind. But there are wonderful people of all political spectrums, mind you, within the labor movement. The religious groups, Unitarians have done some great economic justice, social justice work among many, many different religious groups. I'm thinking of who else is working on. There's community bankers. That's my role. I can get way too wonky, so I spend most of my time talking to CEOs and executives of banks and credit unions. The community bankers really share the same values, I think, as we do, and so we have to be very cautious and conscious, of not labeling all banks as all banks. That there really are different. I would say there's large banks, there's regional banks, and there are the community banks, and you would be surprised at how many communities share the same values you all do. So be aware of the language used too. I guess that's kind of the main group. So we have outspoken Republicans and Democrats in the legislature advocating for this.
Last question.
Yeah. I'm taking too long to answer them, right?
No.
So yeah, one in the back.
You had mentioned that you're working with a coalition or group of family farmers, and then you also mentioned finding common values, and one of those being push for social justice. And I was wondering if there's if you've come up with somewhat of a charter of principles that you ask, or that the farmers themselves collectively agree to abide by, such as sort of an example of that would be in microfinance community, they say we're going to abide by not having any injustice towards anyone, or if that includes wages for their workers.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to answer that question. So the question is, are there guiding values that coalesce this coalition? And strictly speaking, in the coalition Oregonians for a State Bank, the driving value is let's invest in Oregon, not in Wall Street. And everybody that I mentioned understands that one, that the Wall Street banks are extracting money out of our community and they're hurting our community. So that's the driving value there. The second one would be that the community scale institutions or credit unions in our community banks are vital for our communities and we need to support them. So that's an inherent moving money in there. I think there's a difficulty on a political campaign if there's too much institutionalized values that are larger than the campaign you're working on, because then you're always going to create some division. So what do I mean by that? As if it was started by either of the major national parties, you'd have big problems there if there were coherent values in either of those. The Working Families Party, though, has been instrumental in moving our political process forward. They have a 4-part platform, and it relates to the 95% of working families in Oregon. That's what do they need? And the State Bank was one of their platforms. Access to meaningful employment is another, which relates to the State Bank, and health care for all, which is something we should all have access to in a country of this as well. So you start to think in terms of those values rather than institutionalized power. And I think that in any progressive movement, once power becomes institutionalized, then there's a danger there too. So it's nice to have freshness come together to build and reconnect with maybe untraditional allies. pass back to Caitlin. And I really appreciate the time, and this is a beautiful place. My wife and I's first time to Bellingham, so it's really nice.